The morning sun cast long shadows across the flight deck of the USS Roosevelt as Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos bent over another stack of 20mm rounds. Sweat dripped from her forehead despite the cool Pacific breeze, but she never slowed her pace. Around her, the controlled chaos of carrier operations continued as jets roared overhead and deck crews shouted orders above the engine noise. Maria had been working the ammunition detail for 6 months now, ever since she transferred from the smaller destroyer where she started her Navy career. Most sailors saw ammo handling as grunt work, something you did until you could move up to more technical positions. But Maria approached it differently. She treated every round like it mattered, because she knew it did. "Santos, you're making the rest of us look bad," called out Petty Officer Williams from across the deck. He was struggling with his own stack, fumbling with the safety mechanisms that Maria seemed to handle without even looking. Maria just smiled and kept working. She had learned long ago not to respond to comments like that. In her 3 years in the Navy, she had heard plenty of remarks about women in combat positions, about sailors from small towns in Texas who spoke with accents, about people who worked too hard and made others uncomfortable. She let her work speak for itself. The ammunition she was stacking would feed the close-in weapons systems that protected the carrier from incoming missiles and aircraft. Every round had to be perfect, every stack positioned exactly right, every safety check completed without error. One mistake could mean the difference between life and death for the 5,000 sailors aboard the Roosevelt. As she worked, Maria's hand unconsciously moved to the small ribbon hidden beneath her uniform shirt. She had worn it every day for the past year, tucked away where no one could see it. The Purple Heart medal that came with it was locked safely in her locker, but the ribbon stayed with her always. She had earned it on her previous ship during a missile attack off the coast of Yemen. When the alarm sounded and everyone ran for battle stations, Maria had stayed behind to help evacuate wounded sailors from a damaged compartment. Shrapnel from the explosion had caught her in the shoulder and leg, but she kept going until everyone was safe. The medal ceremony had been small, held in the ship's mess hall with just the captain and a few senior officers present. They told her she was a hero, that her actions had saved lives, but Maria never felt like a hero. She felt like she was just doing her job, doing what any good sailor would do. After the ceremony, she had quietly asked the captain if they could keep the award out of her official records that would transfer with her. She didn't want people treating her differently. Didn't want to be known as the girl with the Purple Heart, instead of just another good sailor. The captain had looked at her strangely, but agreed to her request. Now, months later on the Roosevelt, nobody knew about the medal. They just saw another petty officer doing ammunition work, someone who happened to be very good at her job. Maria preferred it that way. She had grown up in a family where you proved yourself through actions, not awards. Her father had been a mechanic who could fix any car that rolled into his garage, not because he had certificates on the wall, but because he understood machines and worked harder than anyone else. "Attention on deck." The sharp command cut through the morning noise. Maria looked up to see Admiral Richardson walking across the flight deck, accompanied by the ship's captain and several other senior officers. The Admiral was making his quarterly inspection of the Roosevelt, checking on operations and meeting with the crew. All around the deck, sailors snapped to attention. Maria straightened up from her work, coming to attention like everyone else. But she noticed the Admiral's eyes scanning the ammunition stations, taking in the details of how the work was being done. Admiral Richardson had a reputation throughout the fleet as someone who cared more about competence than politics. He had started as an enlisted sailor himself, working his way up through the ranks over 30 years. Stories about him were legendary. How he had once personally led a damage control team during a fire at sea, how he knew the technical specifications of every weapons system in the Navy, how he could spot problems that others missed. The Admiral stopped at Williams's station first, asking questions about the ammunition loading procedures. Williams stumbled through his answers, clearly nervous about being questioned by such a high-ranking officer. The Admiral nodded politely, but Maria could see he wasn't impressed. Then the Admiral moved to her station. Maria stood at attention, waiting for his questions. But instead of asking about procedures, Admiral Richardson looked carefully at her ammunition stacks. He examined the spacing between rounds, the alignment of the safety devices, the labeling system she had developed to track different types of ammunition. "How long have you been working ammunition, petty officer?" he asked. 6 months on this ship, sir. 3 years total in the Navy. "And who taught you to stack rounds like this?" Maria hesitated for a moment. The truth was that nobody had taught her. She had learned the basic procedures in training, but everything else, the precise spacing, the extra safety checks, the organizational system, she had figured out herself through trial and error. "I learned the basics in training, sir. The rest I picked up by paying attention to what works best." Admiral Richardson nodded slowly. He walked around her station, examining it from different angles. Maria noticed that Captain Morrison and the other officers were watching the Admiral's reaction carefully, trying to read his thoughts. "These stacks are positioned for maximum efficiency during rapid loading operations," the Admiral said, speaking as much to the other officers as to Maria. "The safety mechanisms are checked and double-checked. The labeling system would allow any sailor to quickly identify the right ammunition type even in combat conditions." He turned back to Maria. "This is textbook ammunition handling, Petty Officer Santos. Actually, it's better than textbook. Where did you serve before this?" "USS Fletcher, sir. A destroyer." "What was your position there?" Maria felt her heart rate increase slightly. She could answer the question truthfully, but that might lead to follow-up questions she preferred to avoid. "Damage control and weapons maintenance, sir." The Admiral studied her face for a moment, and Maria had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see more than she wanted to reveal. But he simply nodded and moved on to the next station. As the inspection party continued across the deck, Maria returned to her work. But she noticed Captain Morrison hanging back, watching her for a few extra moments before following the Admiral. She wondered what that meant. The rest of the morning passed normally. Jets launched and landed. Ammunition was moved and stacked, and the routine of carrier operations continued. But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed during the Admiral's visit. During the lunch break, she sat by herself in the mess hall, eating quickly so she could return to work early. She preferred the quiet time before the afternoon shift began, when she could double-check her work without interruption. Santos. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez approached her table. Rodriguez was the senior enlisted sailor in charge of all ammunition operations, a 20-year Navy veteran who had seen everything and didn't waste words. "Yes, Chief? The Admiral wants to see you in the captain's cabin at 1500 hours. Maria felt her stomach drop. "Did I do something wrong, Chief?" Rodriguez studied her face. "I don't think so. But admirals don't usually ask to see petty officers unless there's a good reason. You sure there's nothing you want to tell me about your background?" Maria shook her head. "No, Chief. I just do my job." "Well, whatever this is about, you better be ready for it." "And Santos?" Rodriguez paused as he walked away. "Admirals don't make social calls. This is about something specific." The afternoon dragged by as Maria tried to focus on her work while wondering what Admiral Richardson wanted to discuss. She ran through everything that had happened during the inspection, trying to figure out if she had said something wrong or if there was some problem she hadn't noticed. At 14:50, she changed into a clean uniform and made her way to the captain's cabin. Her hands were steady, but she could feel her heart beating faster than normal. In 3 years in the Navy, she had never been called to meet with anyone higher than a lieutenant commander. The captain's aide directed her to wait outside the cabin door. Through the thin bulkhead, she could hear voices inside, though she couldn't make out the words. At exactly 1500 hours, the door opened, and Captain Morrison emerged. "Petty Officer Santos, the Admiral will see you now." Maria stepped inside the small but well-appointed cabin. Admiral Richardson was seated behind the captain's desk, studying a file that lay open in front of him. He gestured for her to take the chair across from him. "Sit down, Santos. We need to talk." Maria sat rigidly at attention, hands folded in her lap. Admiral Richardson closed the file and looked at her directly. "I've been reviewing your service record since this morning's inspection. Interesting reading." Maria's mouth went dry. If he had pulled her complete service record, then he knew about the Purple Heart. He knew about everything. "You've had an unusual career path for someone who's only been in the Navy for 3 years, the Admiral continued. damage control specialist, weapons maintenance technician, now ammunition handler. Most sailors try to specialize in one area. I go where the Navy needs me, sir. Yes, you do. And according to your record, you've excelled in every position. Admiral Richardson opened the file again. Commendation for outstanding performance during emergency repairs at sea. Letter of appreciation from your commanding officer on the Fletcher. And something else that's not in your official transfer records. Here it comes, Maria thought. She waited for him to mention the Purple Heart, to ask why she had hidden it. But Admiral Richardson surprised her. Your commanding officer on the Fletcher sent me a personal message this afternoon. He wanted to make sure I understood what kind of sailor I had on my ship. The Admiral leaned forward. He told me about Yemen, Santos. About what you did during that missile attack. About why your Purple Heart doesn't appear in your transfer records. Maria felt her face flush. Sir, I requested that the award not be transferred. I didn't want special treatment. I know. And that tells me more about your character than any medal ever could. Admiral Richardson stood up and walked to the small porthole that looked out over the flight deck. Do you know why I stopped at your ammunition station this morning? No, sir. Because in 30 years of naval service, I've learned to recognize excellence when I see it. Your work this morning wasn't just good, Santos. It was exceptional, the kind of attention to detail that saves lives in combat. He turned back to her. But what really caught my attention wasn't your technical skills. It was the way you carried yourself, confident but not arrogant, professional without being rigid. You reminded me of the best sailors I've served with. Maria didn't know how to respond to that, so she remained silent. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an honest answer, Admiral Richardson said. Why are you hiding your Purple Heart? Maria took a deep breath before answering Admiral Richardson's question. She had never spoken about this to anyone, not even her family back home in Texas. Sir, I grew up in a place where people earned respect through their work, not their awards, she began slowly. My father always told me that recognition should come from what you do every day, not from one moment that people remember. Admiral Richardson listened without interrupting, his expression encouraging her to continue. When I got to the Roosevelt, I wanted people to see me as a good sailor, not as someone who had been through something dramatic. I've seen what happens to people who get labeled as heroes. Sometimes they start believing their own reputation instead of focusing on the job. And you were afraid that would happen to you? Maria nodded. Maybe, or maybe I was afraid people would expect me to be something I'm not. The truth is, sir, what happened in Yemen scared me. When those missiles hit and the compartment started flooding, I was terrified. I helped those sailors because it was the right thing to do, but I was shaking the whole time. Admiral Richardson returned to his seat. Santos, can I tell you something about courage? Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. What you did in Yemen wasn't heroic because you weren't scared. It was heroic because you were scared, and did it anyway. The Admiral opened her file again. Your commanding officer told me something else. He said that after the missile attack, when the ship was being repaired, you volunteered for extra duty helping to train new damage control teams. You spent your off-duty hours teaching other sailors the skills that had helped you save lives. Maria remembered those weeks. The Fletcher had been docked for repairs, and many of the crew were new sailors who had never experienced combat. She had seen how unprepared some of them were for emergency situations, and it worried her. Those skills are important, sir. Everyone should know them. Exactly, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. Admiral Richardson closed the file and leaned back in his chair. I'm not here just for a routine inspection, Santos. I'm here because the Navy is facing some challenges, and we need sailors who understand what really matters. The Admiral explained that recent conflicts had shown gaps in how the Navy trained its personnel for combat situations. Too many sailors were technically proficient but lacked the practical experience and mindset needed when things went wrong. We're developing a new training program, he said. It's designed to teach not just procedures, but judgment. Not just technical skills, but leadership under pressure. We need instructors who have been tested in real situations and can teach others not just what to do, but how to think. Maria began to understand where this conversation was heading. I want you to consider joining this program, Santos. You'd be promoted to Petty Officer First Class and given additional training in instruction and leadership. Then you'd help develop curricula and train other sailors across the fleet. The offer was unexpected and overwhelming. Maria had never thought about becoming an instructor, had never seen herself as someone who taught others. She was used to working quietly in the background, doing her job without drawing attention. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for something like that. I'm just an ammunition handler. Admiral Richardson smiled. No, you're not. You're a sailor who takes pride in excellence, who thinks about how her work affects the safety of her shipmates, and who has proven herself under the most difficult circumstances. Those are exactly the qualities we need. He stood up and walked to a bookshelf mounted on the cabin wall. Let me tell you a story, Santos. 25 years ago, I was a petty officer on a cruiser in the Persian Gulf. We took fire during a night operation, and our forward gun mount was damaged. The Admiral pulled down a framed photograph showing a much younger version of himself standing with a group of sailors. My chief told me to take a damage control team forward and assess the situation. I was terrified, just like you were in Yemen, but I had learned from a senior petty officer who taught me that being scared was normal, that courage meant focusing on the mission despite the fear. He set the photograph on the desk where Maria could see it. That senior petty officer had taught me to think about my shipmates first, to understand that my job wasn't just about following procedures but about keeping people alive. He had earned a Bronze Star in Vietnam, but he never mentioned it. I only found out years later when I saw his full service record. Maria looked at the photograph, seeing the young sailors who were depending on their leaders to make the right decisions. We got the gun mount back online that night, and nobody got hurt. But the lesson I learned wasn't about damage control procedures. It was about leadership, about taking responsibility for others, even when you're scared, about thinking beyond your own job to understand how everything connects. Admiral Richardson returned to his seat. That's what I saw in your ammunition station this morning, Santos. You weren't just stacking rounds according to regulations. You were thinking about the sailors who would need that ammunition in an emergency, organizing everything so they could do their jobs effectively even under stress. The comparison made Maria uncomfortable. She had never thought of her work in such terms, had never seen herself as a leader or teacher. Sir, I don't have the education for something like that. I barely finished high school before joining the Navy. Education comes in many forms, the Admiral replied. You've learned things in 3 years that some officers never understand after decades of service. You understand that attention to detail saves lives. You understand that competence builds trust. Most importantly, you understand that real leadership means putting others first. He opened her file one more time. Your record shows that you've completed advanced correspondence courses in weapons systems, damage control, and logistics management. Your test scores are in the top 5% of all enlisted personnel. The education is there, Santos. What matters is how you apply it. Maria felt overwhelmed by the possibilities and responsibilities the Admiral was describing. Part of her was excited by the challenge, but another part worried about whether she could live up to such expectations. What would this training program involve, sir? 6 months of intensive instruction at the Naval War College, working with some of our best tactical instructors and educational specialists. You'd study not just technical subjects, but leadership psychology, training methodology, and crisis management. The Admiral explained that after the formal training, she would be assigned to help develop new curricula for damage control and weapons training across the fleet. She would work with teams at different bases, observing current training methods and helping to improve them. Eventually, you'd be assigned to train instructors who would teach at various installations. You'd help shape how the Navy prepares its sailors for real-world challenges. The scope of the opportunity was staggering. Maria had never imagined that her military career could lead to something so significant, so far beyond the technical ratings she had been pursuing. Can I ask why you're offering this to me, sir? There must be other sailors with more experience, more formal education. Admiral Richardson considered his answer carefully. Experience comes in different forms, Santos. You have something that can't be taught in a classroom. You've been tested under fire and proven that you can think clearly when lives are on the line. You've shown judgment, courage, and integrity. He gestured toward her hidden ribbon. More importantly, you've shown that you understand the difference between recognition and responsibility. A lot of people want the first, without accepting the second. You're willing to take on responsibility without seeking recognition. The Admiral leaned forward. The Navy needs leaders who understand that their job is to prepare others for situations they hope those others will never face. We need instructors who can teach not just skills, but mindset. We need people who take pride in the success of others, not just their own achievements. Maria thought about her father's garage back in Texas, about how he had taught her that good work spoke for itself. She thought about the sailors she had helped evacuate in Yemen, about the new damage control teams she had trained on the Fletcher. She realized that she had been teaching all along, just not in a formal way. If I accepted this position, what would happen to my current assignment? You'd be detached from the Roosevelt within 2 weeks and report to Newport for the training program. Your replacement has already been identified. Another petty officer who's shown similar potential. The Admiral closed her file and stood up. I'm not going to pressure you for an immediate answer, Santos. This is a big decision that would change the direction of your career. Take some time to think about it. He walked her to the door of the cabin. But let me leave you with this thought. Right now, you're excelling at work that directly impacts the safety of the sailors on this ship. If you accept this position, you'll have the opportunity to impact the safety and effectiveness of sailors throughout the entire fleet. As Maria left the captain's cabin, her mind was spinning with possibilities and concerns. The opportunity was enormous, but it would mean leaving behind the quiet competence that had defined her naval career so far. She walked back to the flight deck, where the evening shift was preparing ammunition for the next day's operations. Her replacement at the ammunition station was struggling with the same issues that Williams had shown during the morning inspection. Without thinking about it, Maria walked over to help. She showed the sailor how to check the safety mechanisms more efficiently, how to organize the rounds for quicker access during emergencies, how to double-check the documentation without slowing down the process. As she worked, she realized that teaching came naturally to her. She had been doing it informally for months, helping other sailors understand not just the procedures, but the reasons behind them. The Admiral's offer would simply formalize what she was already doing and extend its impact far beyond a single ship. That evening, Maria sat alone in her berthing compartment, staring at the Purple Heart ribbon she had kept hidden for so long. She thought about the conversation with Admiral Richardson, about the opportunity he had offered, about the responsibility that would come with it. For the first time since earning the medal, she wondered if hiding it had been the right choice. Not because she wanted recognition, but because her experiences, both the difficult ones and the successful ones, might help other sailors prepare for their own challenges. She thought about the new sailors she had trained on the Fletcher, about how nervous and uncertain they had been before learning the skills that might someday save their lives or the lives of their shipmates. She thought about the ammunition handler who was struggling to master the safety procedures that could prevent accidents during combat operations. Maybe the Admiral was right. Maybe her experiences, including the ones she preferred not to talk about, could serve a larger purpose. Maybe hiding her background wasn't protecting her humility. Maybe it was preventing her from helping others who could benefit from what she had learned. As the ship rocked gently in the Pacific swells, Maria made her decision. She would accept Admiral Richardson's offer, not because she wanted advancement or recognition, but because she understood that her real job had always been taking care of her shipmates. This position would just allow her to take care of a lot more of them. The next morning, Maria requested a meeting with Admiral Richardson. She found him on the bridge, reviewing navigation charts with the ship's officers as they prepared for upcoming training exercises. "Sir, I've made my decision about the training program." Admiral Richardson looked up from the charts. "Walk with me, Santos." They stepped out onto the bridge wing, where the morning air was crisp and the sounds of flight operations provided a familiar backdrop. The Admiral waited for her to speak. "I accept your offer, sir. But I have one request." "What's that?" Maria reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out the Purple Heart ribbon she had kept hidden for so long. I want to wear this again, not for recognition, but because the experiences it represents are part of what I can teach others. Admiral Richardson examined the ribbon, understanding immediately what it meant for her to make this choice. You've thought carefully about this. End quote. Yes, sir. I realized that hiding my background wasn't protecting my humility. It was preventing me from helping others prepare for situations they might face. My experiences, both the difficult ones and the successful ones, are tools I can use to train better sailors. The Admiral nodded approvingly. That shows the kind of mature leadership thinking we need in this program. When you report to Newport, you'll find that many of your fellow instructors have similar backgrounds. People who have been tested and proven themselves, who understand that their experiences can benefit others. Over the following days, as word spread about Maria's new assignment, reactions from her fellow sailors were mixed. Some congratulated her on the promotion and opportunity. Others seemed surprised that someone who had kept such a low profile was being selected for such a significant role. Chief Rodriguez found her during a quiet moment on the flight deck. So you're really leaving us for the instructor program? Yes, Chief. It wasn't an easy decision. Rodriguez studied her face. You know, I always wondered about you, Santos. You work harder than anyone else. But you never seemed interested in advancement. Now I understand why. He gestured toward the Purple Heart ribbon now visible on her uniform. How long have you been hiding that? About a year, Chief. Well, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Both about wearing it now, and about taking the instructor position. You've got a gift for teaching, even if you don't realize it. Rodriguez pointed across the deck to where several sailors were working at ammunition stations. Half the people working over there learned their techniques from watching you. You never made a big deal about teaching them, but they picked up your habits, your attention to detail, your way of thinking about safety. Maria looked at the sailors he indicated and realized he was right. Without formal instruction, she had been influencing how others approached their work simply by setting an example and offering quiet guidance when needed. That's what good instructors do, Rodriguez continued. They don't just teach procedures, they teach mindset. They help people understand not just what to do, but why it matters. 2 weeks later, Maria stood on the flight deck for the last time as a member of the Roosevelt's crew. Her replacement had arrived and was learning the ammunition systems under her guidance. The young sailor was eager but inexperienced, asking the same kinds of questions Maria had asked when she first transferred to the carrier. The key thing to remember, Maria explained as they worked together, is that every round you stack might be needed to protect this ship and everyone on it. The extra time you spend checking safety mechanisms, organizing for quick access, making sure everything is perfect. That's not just following regulations. That's taking care of your shipmates. The new sailor nodded seriously, understanding that he was receiving more than technical training. He was learning an approach to military service that went beyond following orders to accepting responsibility for others. Admiral Richardson came to see Maria off when her helicopter transport arrived. I'll be interested to hear about your progress at Newport, Santos. I think you're going to find that teaching suits you better than you expected. Thank you for seeing potential in me that I didn't see in myself, sir. The potential was always there. You just needed the right opportunity to develop it. The Admiral shook her hand. Remember what I told you about courage. It's not the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. Teaching can be intimidating too, but you'll find that the same principles apply. As the helicopter lifted off from the Roosevelt's flight deck, Maria watched the carrier grow smaller beneath her. She thought about the path that had brought her to this moment. From a small town in Texas to the deck of a Navy carrier, from hiding her achievements to accepting a role that would put her experiences front and center. The flight to Naval Station Newport took several hours, giving Maria time to reflect on the changes ahead. She would be trading the familiar routines of shipboard life for the academic environment of the Naval War College. Instead of working with ammunition and weapon systems, she would be learning about curriculum development and instructional methodology. But the core mission remained the same: taking care of sailors, helping them develop the skills and mindset they needed to succeed in challenging situations. The scope would be larger, but the fundamental purpose was unchanged. When Maria arrived at Newport, she discovered that the training program was more intensive and comprehensive than she had imagined. The other participants included sailors from various specialties who had been selected for their demonstrated competence and potential as instructors. Her first assignment was to observe current training programs and identify areas for improvement. Maria spent weeks watching classes in damage control, weapons systems, and emergency procedures. She quickly noticed patterns in how information was presented and how students responded. Most of the instruction focuses on procedures, she noted in her first report to the program director. Students learn what to do in specific situations, but they don't always understand the underlying principles that would help them adapt when circumstances change. Her observation led to discussions about how to incorporate more scenario-based training, where students had to think through problems rather than just memorize responses. Maria found herself contributing ideas based on her experiences aboard ship, where real emergencies rarely matched the textbook examples exactly. As the months progressed, Maria discovered that her background as an enlisted sailor gave her a different perspective from many of the officers in the program. She understood the challenges faced by junior sailors who were learning complex systems while dealing with the stress of shipboard life. "We need to remember that most of our students are 18 or 19 years old," she said during one planning session. "They're away from home for the first time, living in close quarters with people they've never met, trying to learn skills that could save lives. The instruction has to be clear and practical, not just theoretically correct." Her insights helped shape new approaches to training that took into account the realities of military life. Instead of abstract scenarios, the programs began incorporating the kinds of distractions and pressures that sailors actually faced aboard ship. Maria also contributed to the development of leadership training for petty officers and chiefs. Drawing on her own experiences, she helped design curricula that emphasized the importance of setting examples and providing informal mentorship. "Leadership in the Navy isn't just about giving orders," she explained to one group of instructor candidates. "It's about creating an environment where sailors want to excel, where they understand that their individual competence affects the safety and success of the entire crew." She shared stories from her time on the Roosevelt and the Fletcher, describing how senior sailors had influenced her development, not through formal instruction, but through their daily example of professionalism and dedication. As her time at Newport neared its end, Maria was assigned to help pilot test the new training programs at different installations. She traveled to bases across the country, working with local instructors to implement the improved curricula. At each location, she found herself drawing on all her experiences: the technical knowledge gained through years of hands-on work, the leadership lessons learned from watching effective chiefs and officers, and the understanding of human nature developed through her interactions with sailors from diverse backgrounds. The feedback from these pilot programs was overwhelmingly positive. Students reported that the training was more engaging and practical than previous versions. Instructors appreciated having curricula that reflected real-world conditions rather than idealized scenarios. 1 year after leaving the Roosevelt, Maria received orders to her permanent assignment as a senior instructor at the Navy's Training Center in Great Lakes, Illinois. She would be responsible for developing and overseeing damage control and emergency response training for all new sailors entering the fleet. The night before reporting to her new position, Maria sat in her temporary quarters reviewing the materials she had helped create over the past year: manuals, lesson plans, assessment criteria, and training scenarios, all designed to prepare sailors for challenges they hoped they would never face. She thought about the conversation with Admiral Richardson that had started this journey, about his belief that her experiences could benefit others throughout the fleet. Looking at the stack of materials on her desk, she realized that his prediction had come true. Every lesson plan incorporated insights gained through her years of enlisted service. Every training scenario reflected real situations she had observed or experienced. Every assessment criterion was designed to ensure that sailors developed not just technical competence but the judgment and confidence needed in crisis situations. The Purple Heart ribbon was prominently displayed on her uniform now, along with the new ribbons she had earned for her work in instructor development. But more importantly, she had learned to see her experiences as valuable resources that could help others succeed. When she reported for duty at Great Lakes the next morning, Maria was assigned to meet with the commanding officer and receive her initial briefing. Captain Williams reviewed her background and the work she had done at Newport. "Your reputation precedes you, Senior Chief Santos," the captain said, noting her recent promotion. "The programs you helped develop at Newport are being implemented fleet-wide. You've had a significant impact on how we prepare our sailors for real-world challenges." Maria accepted the compliment but focused on the work ahead. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to continuing that work here. Training sailors is the most important job in the Navy. Everything else depends on how well we prepare our people." As she left the captain's office and walked toward the training facilities, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning on the Roosevelt's flight deck when Admiral Richardson had noticed her ammunition stacks. She had gone from hiding her achievements to using them as teaching tools, from working alone to leading teams of instructors, from impacting one ship to influencing training throughout the fleet. But the core motivation remained unchanged. Whether she was stacking ammunition, training new sailors, or developing curricula, the mission was always the same: taking care of her shipmates, helping them develop the skills and confidence they needed to succeed. That evening, Maria called her father in Texas to tell him about her new assignment. She described the work she would be doing, the responsibility she had been given, the opportunity to shape how the Navy trained its sailors. "I'm proud of you, Mija," her father said. "You've stayed true to what we taught you. That good work speaks for itself. That taking care of others is what really matters. Now you get to teach those values to others." As Maria hung up the phone, she realized that her journey from ammunition handler to senior instructor was really a story about understanding that her individual excellence was never an end in itself. It was always about contributing to something larger: the safety and effectiveness of her fellow sailors, the mission of her ship, the strength of the Navy itself. The next morning, she would begin training the next generation of naval instructors, passing on not just technical knowledge but the understanding that every sailor's competence and dedication contributed to the success of the entire fleet. The shy petty officer who had hidden her achievements was gone, replaced by a leader who understood that her experiences, both difficult and triumphant, were valuable tools for building a stronger Navy.